Good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday to you. Thank you very much for joining us on our Fireside chat series here in the College of Information Technology at Western Governors University. My name is Dr. Joe Dery. I'm the VP and Dean of Data Analytics here in the College of IT. It's great to have you with us tonight for our panel. This is episode 6 of our Analytics Fireside chat series, a day in the life of the analytics practitioner, transforming business with data insights. We have a great panel lined up for you that's going to take us through a little bit of their career journey, some critical skills, a sneak peek into their day-to-day work, and we'll see where the journey takes us. A couple of housekeeping things. You will see that there is a Q&A button in the bottom right-hand corner of the WebEx. So if you want to be able to pose a question to our panelists, which we'll get to at the end of the call, and if we run out of time, we'll follow up through email later. That Q&A is your opportunity to do that. We have several folks on the staff here that are going to be monitoring. There's also a closed caption functionality in the bottom left-hand corner of the WebEx if it's needed. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists, and I was actually sharing with the team a little bit before that this is really a trip down memory lane for me in a lot of ways. So before I came to Western Governors, I spent the last 11 years working for Dell Technologies and EMC before. And each of the panelists, I actually had a chance to come across in my journey from EMC to Dell. In fact, I was just saying that Matt, who I'm going to introduce in a second, was the third person to join my team when I was first building a data science experience. So it is definitely going to be a lot of nostalgia tonight, probably a lot of memories, but really thrilled to have everyone here. So to introduce, so we do have Matt Lostkamp. Matt is the manager of marketing data science at Snowflake, and we'll hear more about his background in a second. We have Renita. Renita, it's great to see you. I know that you're running into a couple of issues. Great to see you pop on there. It's been a while. So Renita is our senior product analyst at Tempo. We have Will Alden. Will is a business engagement lead of decision sciences at Dell Technologies. And last but not least, we have Dr. Hema Shashardri, who is our PhD here. She's a senior data scientist at Akamai Technologies and recent author of Analytics for Business Success, which we're going to hear about in a little bit. So, powerhouse lineup team, I hope you're ready. So I'd like to start off by asking each of you to spend 2 to 3 minutes introducing yourselves. What's your current role? A little story of how you came into analytics. So how did you end up in analytics as a profession? And then we'll dive into some meatier questions. So Matt, do you want to kick us off?
Me too. So my name is Matt. I currently lead the marketing data science team at Snowflake. I've been with the company for about 2 years now. Our team takes on a bunch of different data projects for the company. And really at Snowflake, all of the data teams are embedded within the business units that they support. So myself and our marketing BI team are really the core data team for the entire marketing org. Within that role, I lead projects for pipeline forecasting, so helping our team figure out how well positioned we are to start future quarters and how well is our marketing team setting up our sales team for success. We also have data science models to support our lead scoring efforts. So looking at all the different people that interact with Snowflake marketing and helping to prioritize who among those people we're going to try and have our sales team reach out to. We have an account scoring model that looks at which accounts are the highest propensity to open a new sales opportunity with Snowflake so we can best allocate our sales reps and inside sales team's time. So kind of some of the top line things that I work on day to day. It's definitely an exciting role. So our team really is responsible for end-to-end driving data science projects. So meeting with stakeholders to understand kind of what their business objectives that they want to achieve, figuring out how we can translate that into a data product that we can deliver through machine learning, through visualization tools, and trying to figure out how we can build that with the different tools that are available to us. And then we own the delivery of those in terms of however they're going to be pushed out to our stakeholders, whether that's pushing data into a different system, delivering in a Tableau dashboard, a Streamlit application, or some of the other tools that we use internally. And then we own the kind of maintenance and enablement of those. That's an area that I think is really critically important because we can build amazing data products, but if we don't enable the internal users to make better decisions off of them, it really goes to waste. So our team puts a big effort on how do we enable our internal users. One thing that I think is also exciting about our team at Snowflake is we really strive for thought leadership. So basically everyone on our team is also getting on sales calls to show how do we use Snowflake internally and trying to sell that to our customers. So I've been involved in kind of losing track of the number of different sales deals at this point, but our team is also getting on there and also putting on webinars on Snowflake. So would encourage you to look into those if you're interested to see a little bit more on what our team is doing. Before that, I worked with Will and Joe, and we were so it was almost 8 years at EMC and Dell Technologies, starting in the Business Operations Leadership Development Program. My third rotation was on Joe's team, where I was an analyst on Joe's special projects data science team. From there, I became a data scientist, senior data scientist, kind of moving along with Joe as we took on different data science projects throughout the organization. And during that time, I also completed my master's while working part-time at Northwestern University in data science. So I can definitely empathize with all of the learners here who are also working full-time jobs. I know it's not a easy thing to do. But that's a little bit on my background and some of the things I'm working on today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. And I love the reference to basically drinking your own champagne with the Snowflake product. That's awesome. And we'll definitely come back to that. Renita, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. So my name's Renita. I'm currently a product analyst at a fitness tech startup called Tempo. It's kind of like Peloton, but like for strength training. So pretty cool product that we have. I specifically support the engagement and top of funnel pod. So it's trying to understand how we can better acquire users, as well as how users are engaging with the product and what we can create next so that users continue to engage with us and retain with us. So sort of how I got into analytics and data, I've always loved math. And so throughout school, I really had a knack for math. And in high school, I took AP statistics, where it really showed me like a real world application of math. And so in college, I went on to study statistics and economics. I was really fortunate to have some really formative internships, one of them on Joe's team at Dell EMC. So I think we'll talk more about that later. But those really showed me that data is so powerful to drive informed business decision making. So out of college, I knew that that's really what I wanted to pursue. And so I started at Capital One's analyst development program. Got to see various roles through that rotational program, some traditional data analytics roles, data engineering, as well as data science. So really saw the entire data ecosystem. And I really enjoyed seeing how data, tech, and business can intersect. And that's sort of how I've landed into my product analytics role today.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Hema, would you like to go next? Oh, we're losing your audio. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, guys. COVID is over, but old habits die hard.
It is all good.
So I'm currently working as a data scientist in Akamai Technologies and primarily focused on advanced analytics algorithm development. And for folks who don't know, Akamai primarily started as a CDN company about 20 years ago in Cambridge, and we've kind of expanded to different areas such as security and compute division. And so I'm primarily focused on the network and the compute planning initiatives within Akamai. One of my recent achievements, and I'm super proud about, as Joe mentioned in the introduction, is the book I published, which is now available on Amazon, which is called Analytics for Business Success. And this was written for executives leading the analytics transformation, and practitioners are trying to execute on this transformation. And the other thing which I wanted to hit was, okay, how did I start working in the field of data science? I started my career as a scientist, and then moved on to become a software engineer, and got a degree in got my master's in software engineering, and then kind of did another hop and got into the world of data science. And I started my software engineer career in EMC, and then moved on to Akamai Technologies. That's back to you, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hema. Will, do you want to close us out?
I would love to. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you all on the call here. So I'm Will. So I am at Dell Technologies. I guess the only one of the group that's still at Dell. And I joined Dell in 2016 after my undergrad at Bentley University in economics and finance. And I also joined Dell through the same business operations leadership development program that Matt joined the company through. And I actually kind of ended up in analytics and data science almost by accident, I would say. In my first couple of roles at the company, I was doing a lot of like reporting type work and started engaging with Joe a lot because Joe's team kind of owned the data that I was using and I had a lot of questions. And so I started working with Joe a lot. And then by the time my third year rolled around for my third rotation, I had a meeting with Joe, and Joe basically gave me the hard sell as to why it would benefit me to join his team and kind of pursue a career in analytics. And I'm very glad that I did, and I'm very thankful for that meeting with Joe because it's definitely been a fulfilling career for me over the last whatever number of years I've now kind of been in this business engagement lead role. And so in our current kind of team that I'm working on, so I work in the go-to-market organization at Dell, and so what our team is really focused on is how do we best kind of incentivize our sellers and set up our sellers for success. So our team is doing a lot with quota setting and bringing kind of AI and ML into the quota setting process to try to set accurate quotas and also kind of motivate our sellers in the right way. And now we're also kind of extending that into how do we best assign our sellers to the accounts that they're going to be covering and working to sell to. And so that's kind of been the extension that our team has gone down, and I've been lucky in my role as a business engagement lead to kind of be at the forefront of the projects that we're working on. I'm kind of the, I guess part of the tip of the spear for our team as we get into kind of new waters and start working with different teams. And so it's been a great experience for me, and I've really enjoyed it. And kind of, I would say, analytics is definitely not something that I originally kind of set out to work in. But I think I'm a good example of the fact that, you can get into analytics from a lot of different paths. And also the fact that it's kind of embedded in everything that every company wants to do now. And so kind of being able to be involved in that can kind of give you a really good opportunity at whatever kind of company you're working at or you end up working at.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Will. I'm glad the hard sell worked all those years ago. And
here I am.
Emma, Renita, Matt, thank you for your intros as well. And, for everyone that's on the call tonight, I hope that the takeaway just from these introductions alone, to Will's point, is that you can really get into the field of analytics in a lot of different ways, whether it's through a rotation program, whether it's as an intern, whether it's as somebody pulling you into an office to have a conversation about career pathing and trying to fill a particular need, whether or not you're coming from a traditional science background, or whether you're a firefighter or a nutritionist or a bartender. There is a role for everyone within the analytics umbrella, especially as analytics continues to mature and evolve, and you have all these different roles and capabilities that are really needed to really affect change with a lot of these products, going back to that analytics product lifecycle that Matt was originally touching on. So with that note, I'd like to dive into some of these roles and what each of you are doing. So Matt, I'd like to start with you, and realistically and very, plain for the folks that are here, what does a day in the life of a data scientist really look like? And then I'm kind of interested to hear, as you've gone from being a rotator to a data scientist individual contributor to a senior data scientist and now a manager, what's changed?
Yeah, happy to tackle that question, Joe. So I'll start by saying that I think data scientist is probably one of the more broad terms in the analytics space and can mean a lot of different things at a lot of different companies. So I'm going to talk to what my experience has been past a few different companies. And it's really a combination of where you are in that project lifecycle. So I think to really be effective, you need to understand the business that you support and spend a lot of time meeting with the people that are going to be using your data products. So I have a lot of meetings with stakeholders just even just like touch base one-on-ones with stakeholders. So I'm up to speed on what's important to them. That really occupies a lot of my time as a data scientist. And then obviously there's a lot of coding. So for me, the primary languages that have been important in my career are really SQL, where most companies today are putting a lot of their enterprise data. In terms of modeling, using Python and R. These days, I find myself mostly coding my machine learning projects in Python. But I know a lot of companies still R is very important. When I was on Joe's team, we originally were doing a lot of our modeling in R, but now these days mostly Python for me. And then it's also a lot of presenting back to the business on how they can use our different machine learning models. So I find myself every day getting either messages internally or getting brought on to different team meetings to go through and present some of the work that our team has done. So when I think of a data scientist, it's definitely not someone that is just in their box writing code every day and shipping it out. It's really hard to be effective if you're doing that. For us, especially at Snowflake, data scientist is really more of a kind of senior role, and more generally, it's somebody starts as an analyst and then works their way up into that data scientist position, where they have that kind of broader scope and can really see the big picture on how they work on projects. And then how my role has changed since I have started as a rotator on Joe's team in that development program to being a manager is definitely increased the amount of time that I'm in meetings and increase the scope of projects that I support. I think today our team of myself, one data scientist and an analyst support probably 15 in important projects within the company and different data science models. And so for us to be at that kind of scale, we really have to be in tune with what's important for us to work on. Make sure that we're collaborating effectively and leveraging all the other internal tools that we can. So I think as I've gone more down the management path, it's been increasing number of meetings and kind of increasing that scope of things that I work on. A lot of those projects are really diverse. Or one of the cool ones that we're working on is what we call the Modern Marketing Data Stack, which is an external facing report that we publish on how our customers are using Snowflake for marketing. Definitely not something I'd ever worked on before, but it's cool to work with our marketing department to think about how do we best phrase this analysis? How do we support our product marketing team's vision? It gets me a little bit outside of that kind of traditional data science space, and is a cool thing to work on. So I don't know, Joe, did I hit on everything you wanted me to hit there? Anything that I could expand on?
I think we'll definitely come back to that in a little bit, because I want to touch on a little bit on some of the skill sets that you need to be able to do kind of going beyond the keyboard, if you will, and how some of those things may have amplified as you went into management, but we'll come back to that. The one other thing I think you left out is the fact that we started with SAS before R as well.
Right. Yeah, that R was to replace SAS. I have blocked that out of my mind at this point. But yeah, we one of the original projects I led with Joe was how do we build some of our data science models in R so we can get rid of this what was extremely expensive SAS contract for our team and move into something a little bit faster to iterate on, which is definitely fun to do.
The reason I bring that up, though, is because when you start talking about a lot of these languages, they do evolve with time, right? Depending on which company you're in, what role you're in which
Absolutely.
project you're working on. There may be a combination of languages that you may need to use. Though it seems like the most consistent thing through all of this is our good friend SQL.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for us, Snowflake today sells a product which is, started out as a SQL data warehouse. So obviously it's important for us, but even when I was at Dell, SQL was the language you needed to know if you wanted to work with data, in our data warehouse. Certainly a lot of the modeling would happen somewhere else, but that is definitely the most important language that I know for working with a lot of the data that companies have today, and probably the kind of foundation for a lot of data science roles.
Or folks are outside of a data warehouse, this thing called proc SQL, which tends to make its way into a lot of languages.
Yeah.
So Matt, I appreciate that. So we'll come back to you shortly and we'll dive a little bit more into some of those skills. So Renita, I'd like to go to you next. So you mentioned before you started as an intern and now you are a product analyst. So what does a day in the life of a product analyst look like? What skills do you draw from? Does it kind of resemble the work that's Matt's doing, or is there a different combination?
Yeah, I think it definitely, as Matt said, like I think product analyst is somewhat of a general term. I think there's a semi more emphasis on the product management piece. So I really look at the product analyst role as combining product management and analytics together to create data insights that drive informed product decisions, which thereby impact like business decisions. So it's really like thinking about like how people are using the product, what features we should be developing. So the day in the life varies a lot depending on what's going on. Many tech companies, as Matt alluded to, embed their analysts or data scientists on their cross-functional teams that they're supporting. So, for example, I'm embedded on a few different product pods, as I mentioned, like the top of funnel pods, where we're focusing on problems around how do we acquire customers efficiently? Are they onboarding? Where are they like dropping off in the funnel? To like, I also support the engagement pod. So understanding how users are using our product, engaging with it, and like, are there features that are not being used or are being heavily used, and like what does that imply about user behavior and where we should be going next? So depending on the day, I could, one area that I focus a lot on is helping create metrics and understanding around the right metrics to like understand what we're trying to measure. So making sure that we have the right metrics in place to drive those decisions. I also spend a lot of time experimenting. So designing A/B tests, as well as doing analysis from the results of A/B tests, where we can test out features before launching them to our entire user base to make sure that they're having the intended impact that we want them to have, and that they're not having any detrimental impact to our user base. And lastly, I think a huge part of the product analyst job family is definitely doing some of the deep dive analyses to better understand user trends and user behavior. So a lot of the skills that I pull from are similar to Matt, have definitely been using SQL every day, R and Python a lot to analyze experiment results. So definitely looking at trends, figuring out the right metrics. I also am pulling from a lot of the data science principles that I know Joe and I worked on a lot. So A/B testing is just hypothesis testing. So understanding p-values and significance levels and all those really like core stats concepts are things that I work on a regular basis.
That's awesome. I love the parallels between what this role is, what Matt's doing, but also I think there's a theme emerging in the conversation already around these roles will vary greatly depending on which company and even what team in a company that you're on. So for all those students or graduates that are on right now that are thinking about that next role or what that analytics role is going to be, it just emphasizes the fact that you really need to read job descriptions and in a lot of ways interview the interviewer to try to understand what they expect. Do they want you to be in SQL? Do they want you to be in R or Python? Do they want you to be using Alteryx? Do they want you to be using Data Robot? Or what's the databases that are there? Are you in Snowflake? Are you in Databricks? Are you in something else? These are all things that you can also be asking the interviewers who are going in and talking to folks in your network that may work at those companies. So you can understand what it is that a product analyst does. And, Renita was diving into the importance of A/B testing and experimentation and a lot of those more science-backed principles, right? That may be a little bit different than what you may see in some other teams that are looking more at predictive modeling or some others. Awesome, Renita. Thank you. So, Will, I would love to talk a little bit about the business engagement lead. And I will start by saying that since that role was originally defined and you really took it and ran with it and helped to define it at Dell, it's been called a lot of different things now too. It's been called the analytics translator. It's been called the analytics product manager. I'm going to call you the Jedi. I think we can call you a few different things here. What does a business engagement lead do? What's the value that it brings to the team?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think, to that point, I think there's, and the broader point you're making kind of about these other different roles as well, is that like, it can be kind of different things to different people, and you can kind of make it what your team or your company needs you to be. I think what a lot of the role really is how do you bring scale to the work that your team is doing? there's similar to, Matt now in his kind of management role, where a lot of his time is spent in meetings and kind of working with stakeholders and whatnot. That's really what my day-to-day is, right? My day-to-day is a lot of this, right? It's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of talking to people, it's a lot of understanding what are the problems that the business is having, or how can we help with whatever they're doing, right? And being able to then translate that back to our team to be able to either create an analytics solution or kind of enhance an existing analytics solution, to be able to drive the progress that we want to drive as a company. And so I think what a lot of it is, right, is we don't necessarily, want our data scientists on our team, or our data engineers or machine learning engineers, whatever kind of analytics role you want to talk about. We want them to spend, of course, some of their time, gathering understanding the business, gaining business context. But in a lot of senses also, we don't want their calendar to look like my calendar, where it's just blocked all day with meetings, right? And so I think the scale that I'm able to help bring is being able to understand enough about the work that our internal team is doing. So actually be able to understand enough about, how is our modeling working, or, what different, functionalities could we deliver, and then being able to spend that time with the stakeholders to really kind of get deep with them, and then be able to bring that back and translate it back to our team. So it's kind of acting as that bridge between the business, what do we need to do to drive the business forward, and being able to bring it back to our team and kind of create a solution that works, really, right? And I think, kind of with that, there's probably two main kind of skill sets that I look at in my role. The first being storytelling is probably the most important thing in my role, because when we're bringing a solution back to the business, or if it's people we've never worked with before, and it's how can we help, right? What can we bring to the table that they don't maybe know about today? And being able to kind of get them bought in and believe in what we can offer, but then also being able to kind of translate that back to our team internally, and kind of tell the story maybe a little bit differently, so that people who have a more technical background can kind of also get bought in and be like, yeah, this is actually important. I'm passionate about building this solution. And then kind of right along with that, the other kind of big skill that I always am very conscious of in my role is empathy, and being sure that I'm understanding, from the business perspective, they might have a challenge that is a big problem for them. It might not seem like one at face value, but being able to kind of get in their shoes and say, yeah, I get it, right? Like, I understand why that's such a tough challenge for you. And then once again, being able to bring that back to our team and translate that into something that can be a solution, and kind of continue to push the team forward and build our team's brand. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of an all-encompassing role, but I think a lot of it is really, how do we make the right decisions as a team? How do we push the business forward? And how do we drive the most scale out of the resources we have on our team?
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate the overview there. And, as you were talking, I was trying to think of metaphors that were coming to my mind. And one was that in some ways you serve as a bouncer to a nightclub. In other ways, you're a UN ambassador.
Yep.
In other ways, you are a door-to-door salesman.
Yep.
But, a lot of these things, to your point, that empathy component, emotional intelligence, change management, improvisation in a lot of ways, right? It's where a lot of these softer skills are coming in, but still knowing that if you need to code, you can, right? So I know you can write SQL, my friend.
You taught me on a whiteboard.
But I think it's, it's important to know that, as you're going across these, you're going to see, we'll see this again with Hemar in a second too, different calibrations of a lot of these roles, right? So if you think about programming skills and data skills and mathematics skills and business influence, each of these roles have different calibrations at different points in time, right? The beautiful thing about this is you can really play to the passion. So as you're going through, you saw Matt get really passionate about what he's doing. You saw Renita get really passionate. Will got really passionate. They're all passionate about the skills that reflect who they are and what mean value to them. So just keep that in mind as we're going through. And Emma, I'd like you to close out this first round. So as a data scientist, right, I'd love for you to compare a little bit to the way that Matt described it. Are you doing data science in the same way? Is it a little bit different? But also, how might it be different when you're supporting different parts of the organization? So we've heard a little bit about sales and go-to-market operations and product, but you've been more on the more technical side of the house in engineering and product development and so forth. So does that make a difference? Is it still the same role?
I'm gonna unmute myself, so that's a good start. Right. Before we go into the specific role, I mean, what specifically I'm doing day to day, I think it might be helpful to kind of maybe summarize what I heard, and kind of, I think the big question that probably comes to the audience mind, and this is something I heard a lot from talking to a whole bunch of people who are either trying to get into data science, or folks who've been doing in data science for a while and doing different analyst role or product management and program, different kind of spectrum of the data science, the rainbow, right? So if you can call that. So I think a definition in my mind, I have a kind of a simple definition in mind. It's so instead of considering data science as a discipline, it's probably best to consider it as an umbrella term, right? So we get caught up in, okay, is this data science? Is this an analyst role? Is this a marketing role and whatnot? So it's kind of an amalgamation of different techniques, and anybody who's kind of working in this area would, they could have to pull in, it's like pulling different tools from the toolbox. So it could be you may require a machine learning skills at some point, or statistics at some point, computer science, data engineering, data architecture, software engineering, software architecture, organizational strategy. We talked a little bit about that, and business activities. And you don't have to be an expert on all of these, but at least you need to kind of have the right, the superheroes, the superhero women in the field, to kind of talk to them and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? And how do I kind of, able to go and explore and learn more about a specific area, which, research is a big component. As we talked earlier, empathy is a big component, trying to put yourself in this person's shoes who's trying to solve some of them. Those are important as well. And then when I think about what is that specifically what I do on a day to day, so I am my primary focus is building advanced analytics algorithms. So which I call, kind of categorize it as predictive and prescriptive analytics. So in EMC, I used to be as Joe mentioned, in a product development group. I started off as a software engineer, and in building products for external customers. And my role has slightly changed in Akamai, where I'm building products for internal customers. So in EMC, I used to maintain production code. Here, my primary focus is to kind of build proof of concept algorithms, building data pipelines. So that's kind of where the software engineering skills, the master's in computer science plays a significant role, and the data engineering skills, and building data pipelines. So one of the challenges most data scientists face is not just the algorithms, like writing the algorithms and figuring out which algorithm to use and whatnot, but also most organizations don't have the foundational data infrastructure, which is probably where Snowflake and Databricks and all those companies fit in. So some of my day-to-day work is also figuring out how do I build an unified analytics platform so that I can build analytics applications on top of that, and then so build the POC, and then kind of work with the downstream software engineers who are kind of maintaining the production code, and finally doing the handoff to the hot seat team, which is going to maintain the production code. So that's kind of like a whole spectrum of kind of end-to-end analytics, working with the business and figuring out what is the problem they're trying to solve, and kind of going and playing the role of the translator from the team to the internal teams which have the services, and then building up, so I call it an analytics product life cycle in my book. So it's kind of end-to-end analytics, and then the UAT testing with the users and whatnot. And so in addition to that, so in part of my role, which is slightly different from what I used to do at in EMC, here it's more, I also play a role as an internal data and analytics consultant. So kind of instead of, so it's a much broader I would call it data as a horizontal, a much broader problem, trying to help teams within Akamai, solve some of those data and analytics challenges they have. I don't know if I covered all the pieces, and if
There's
that.
a lot of gold nuggets there, Hema, a lot of gold nuggets. And the two for me that really stood out in particular for our students that are on, one is around analytics and data science being a team sport in a lot of ways. And I love the fact that you're talking about going to find people that knew how to do certain things that you can't. And I think the more the field emerges, you don't have to be necessarily that unicorn that can do everything and be an expert of all. Like the reason why, I love having calls with this with old friends is because it shows that we did have broad teams with broad skill sets, with different passions and different skill sets that folks really focused on. And that means that you need to be able to network. You need to be able to figure out who's who in your company and have those go-to folks that you can ask those questions, you can whiteboard with. You can say, hey, I'm really not sure how to do A, B, and C thing, right? Which also means that everyone on the call should be on LinkedIn after this, trying to connect with these fine folks as well, right? Build your networks. The other thing that I love too, Hema, is you did hit a lot of the themes from, Matt and Renita as well. Like you mentioned how sometimes you have to play into the empathy space. So you're telling a story, how you're connecting some of these things, which also kind of, to me, brings to the point that teams that don't have the luxury of having all of these different roles may mean that you may have to try to wear multiple hats, right? You may have to be going on Dr. Google. You may have to get another certification. Maybe you're going to do a degree part-time, as we know some of our panelists have done, and be able to upskill to be able to bridge that gap that team has if you don't have the luxury of having all of these different roles under that same team umbrella.
Right.
So,
and I forgot to mention a few more things, if I can add.
Yeah, go for it.
So the other piece is, don't forget to be humble, right? So if you don't know something, most of the time you're not going to know it, right? Like, because you work with the domain experts and they definitely know more than that specific domain than you do. So be
And they'll
humble.
call you out on it if you try to pretend that you do and you don't, right?
Right. So humility always, and be nice, right? Make friends. Networking, like you mentioned, is amazing. So people want to help people who are nice to them. So, and then upskilling. So that's one piece I didn't cover. I spend I can't say majority of my time, but I have to keep up with new technology, right? If I'm working the technology space, if there's a new package out there, or if there's a new, like Snowflake comes up with a new version, and I have to go and look at what Snowflake did and what's the difference between what Snowflake did and what Databricks did. And okay, does Snowflake have a Dolly model, right? Let's not rabbit hole. Back to you, Joe.
Matt, can you give us an idea of what's coming down the pipeline? So, in all seriousness, Noah, as we go to round two now, we're going to pick on a couple of the themes that we heard. So thank you very much to the panelists for this first round and the great insights and the many gold nuggets that we have there. So, Matt, I'm going to go back to you, and I want to continue our conversation a little bit about some of these skills, especially as you started talking about from the sales perspective, their storytelling. There's some of these softer things that have also really made themselves well known within the data science space. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about what are those skills, and in particular, how can you refine and build them if you don't really think you have them today?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the panelists have hit on it a bit, but really trying to empathize with the people that you're working with, and spending time understanding what their needs are is critically important to be successful in analytics and data science role. And maybe your team will have a Will on it who's able to be that tip of the spear that can go out there, but more likely than not, you will need to work with your stakeholders. And I think just having that confidence to go out there and be humble and admit when you don't know things, because a lot of times you have the expertise in writing code and machine learning, but they're the ones that really know the business process, and you have to spend that time with them to kind of get a better understanding so you can build that effective model or data product. Those are, I think, is just that really kind of critical piece to keep working on. And just not being afraid to get out there and talk to people.
Yeah. And, getting out there and not being afraid to talk to people can sometimes seem a little intimidating for the folks that are on the call, right? Especially if you're used to being that person that's coding till 3 o'clock in the morning, which was me for many, many years. And, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, a couple of things you could do. One, Toastmasters, improv comedy, which I've talked about on prior Fireside chat episodes, right? So you guys have heard my story of when I actually went and took improv, not because I'm hilarious, but because I needed to figure out how to be okay with failing in front of people and working off of a team and kind of putting myself out there. There's the ability to go be a part-time bartender, go work at a place where people are literally sitting down in front of you to have a conversation. There's so many different things that you can do to put yourself out there and try. Go ahead, Matt.
One tip that I have from when I started at Snowflake, I have probably standing one-on-ones with 20 different people at Snowflake, whether they're biweekly or monthly. Especially if you're joining a new organization, work with your manager to figure out who are some of the key people that we work with. And everyone's busy, but I think if you're talking about 30 minutes once a month that you have to check in with that cross-functional person, it's going to help you build relationships, and you're, going to build that network. And now that I've been there for 2 years, that has definitely really helped me accelerate my ability to make an impact. Most of my team that I work with is based in San Mateo, and I'm based up in Bellevue, Washington. So I'm remote, but I still feel like I have that presence and have built a ton of relationships just through setting up those one-on-ones. It's a little intimidating when you're going through and you're putting a ton of meetings on the calendar, but I think most people will say yes, and it will start to pay off dividends as you get to know more and more folks.
Is it as many meetings as Will, though?
I don't know. It sounded pretty daunting.
The one thing I want to build on, and that was a great point, Matt. Building that networking muscle in a remote culture is also a weird kind of thing to do. And I know that for a lot of us that were in person, that went virtual with COVID and kind of stayed virtual afterwards, or have teams that are global or around the country, it's a slightly different muscle. And Matt's advice there to book these meetings out is a great piece of advice, right? It's proactively putting water cooler time or coffee shop time on the calendar to say, I need to actively maintain these relationships. I need to get out there, and having something on the calendar in a virtual setting is a great way to do it, because you may not run into people at that coffee shop or at the proverbial water cooler. So don't be intimidated by the fact that networking in the virtual culture is different, right? I'm not going to say it's hard, it's different. And there are definitely some great articles that are out there that talk about that. So Renita, I'm going to go over to you now. And a lot of our students are always curious about the value of internships in particular. And, what is the experience I'm going to get? Is this really going to help to get me to where I want to be? Is it going to expose me to new things? And given that we first met each other through an internship, I'd love to hear your take on it. Is an internship worth it? What advice do you have to our students that are on the call?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have an internship on the data science team at Dell EMC under Joe, and I can't speak highly enough of internships in general, because that internship in particular was really instrumental in my career path. It was really a great way to see how data could make an impact on business decisions in a large organization. So I think that internship experience is really needed. And it's also great because I also had another internship in high school and in college before my Dell EMC internship, which was more focused on biostatistics. I knew I liked math and I knew I liked statistics, but did I want to go more of like the clinical trials route? Wasn't sure. But having those experiences to validate what you like, what you might not like, what aspects of a role you are looking for, I think that is so valuable. And so really from that internship, I validated that I wanted a career in data and in stats. And so that's why I went on to join a rotational program. I knew I wanted to do data and stats, didn't know exactly where in that data ecosystem I wanted to be. So joining a rotational program in addition is kind of like similar to an internship, because you get little like pieces of different roles. So I was able to do 2 rotations, one in a data engineering org. So understanding how we can make clean data, create data pipelines to make effective data, which is all needed for any analytics and data science role. And I feel like it was really valuable to have that rotation because I wouldn't have known all of the things that went into that. So that was really valuable. I also had a data science rotation when I was at Capital One, where I was building out, similar to what I was doing on Joe's team, building features, understanding what features lifted models, so forth. And then also having a more product focused role where I was building out data solutions. So similar to what Will was saying, how he was building out data solutions for internal users, that was one of the things that I also got to see in my rotations at Capital One. So I think internship experience, as well as if there are areas that you can, do a rotation in, I think those experiences are really valuable to understand what you like, what you don't like, what you want to like develop on. I saw that I really appreciated product, and that's sort of where I made the pivot to product analytics after my last role. And so each role I think will teach you so much. So I can't emphasize enough how valuable an internship experience is.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you got the exposure that you did and found your way to Capital One and then to Tempo. And, for the students that are out there on the call right now that may already be working, for example, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, I can't leave my current job to go into an internship. There are ways to get this exposure and this experience, right? You can do it by working on some of these competitions on Kaggle, for example, working for a nonprofit and volunteering some time, which Matt, I know you've done in the past. I think was it the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation you did that with?
It was with a company called DataKind that runs kind of analytics projects for nonprofits, and the one that they did was with the Gates Foundation.
Okay, so I'm
You
not
have one to add from within
completely
my
crazy.
team. One of my team members is currently doing what we were calling a 10% project internally, where he is working with our engineering team because he's interested in the work that our program managers do.
Mhm.
I think that, if this is something outside of your scope, it's worth exploring if your, management team would allow you to work, that, 4 hours a week outside of your normal scope to learn about some other projects on teams too.
Yeah, and in addition to that, as we were talking about networking and the importance of doing that, like also, putting on time with, if you want to go into engineering or data science, whatever it is, putting on time with those people to just be like, hey, I want to like pick your brain about what your role is like, what's your day-to-day like, just like we're exploring how our days look, like being able to do that with your peers and other people in the industry, whether it be at the company you're at, or, I'm sure most people like talking about, what they're passionate about. So I'm sure that half an hour of people's time would really be great and beneficial to seeing what area you'd want to focus on.
100% agree. I think everyone's going to have the courage to take that first step, get those meetings on the calendar, and that is your homework to everyone that's on the call. Put 5 of these sessions on the calendar over the next month, start that networking, get that exposure. Final point on this, rotation programs are not just from out of undergrad into your first role, by the way. Rotation programs exist at many different levels of the corporate hierarchy. There are some that are more junior for folks that are just starting. There are some that are mid-career. There are some that are senior. You just have to do your research with those companies, and networking is a great way to find out and learn about them. So, Will, I'm going to come back to you quick, and maybe you can give me 2 or 3 minutes on this, so then we can wrap up with Hema, and I want to give her a chance to talk about her new book.
Sure.
So, Will, how has your view of this business engagement lead really changed over the years? And why do you think so many companies are hurrying to try to bring these people onto their advanced analytics teams?
Yeah, there's potentially a lot to unpack there, but I'll condense it down here, I guess.
You got 3 minutes, my friend.
I think from a simple sense, the reason why people want to bring in roles similar to mine, I think is largely because no matter what company it is, and whether they truly believe this or not, they want analytics, quote unquote, to be part of everything that they're doing, right? Some companies are really leaning into that, and some companies just say it and maybe hire some people and hope for the best. But regardless, they want analytics to be kind of in every function, right? Whether it's sales or finance or marketing or supply chain, whatever it is. And I think they're asking themselves, well, how do we get there, right? Like, how do we bring analytics and data science into these different areas? And I think a role like mine can help with that a lot, because if you have the technical folks also, on the team who are able to actually build solutions, then you can have people like me who, just go into these meetings and try to be a friendly face and try to build trust with people and try to, build relationships with people. And that's how you're able to kind of evangelize analytics and kind of help spread it across the company and across different functions. And so I think like that's kind of a major reason why there's a big draw for it. And I think, the way that I viewed the role and how that's changed, I think a really important realization for me, which I think is actually true across all analytics roles, but was a huge one for me, especially coming from a rotational program where I was doing a lot of like BI and reporting and stuff. The way that you kind of view your own success and kind of measure how you're doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be by how many lines of code you wrote or how many projects you completed, right? You really should be looking at how much value are you bringing to the organization, and how are you making things better for your team? How are you making things better for your stakeholders? And kind of measure what you're doing and how you're doing on that, and not necessarily how many projects you're delivering or how many lines of code you're delivering. Because I struggled with that for a long time in my role, because I'm not really doing any of the technical coding, building solutions, and I'm also not the end user who's using the solution and actually driving the business forward. I'm somewhere in the middle, but there's a lot of value that I can bring, and understanding that and realizing the value that I can bring in that role is kind of a huge change in how I viewed my role and kind of how I've continued to progress in my role.
This isn't the nostalgia that's kind of coming in that I warned about at the beginning. I remember back many years ago where we used to go out to our stakeholders talking about, this was 20,000 lines of code, or this was 140,000 lines of code, which you almost wanted to wear like a badge of honor to kind of justify your role. But at the same time, now I would look at that and be like, well, why wasn't it half of it? Why aren't you more efficient?
Right.
But I think, so your point, a lot of it is what's the impact you're going to have. And for a lot of the folks that are on the call, knowing that you don't need a portfolio of these things. Sometimes one strategically placed data insight into a redefined business process can have a $300 million impact on a business, or more or less. Like, there's so much impact that you can have by just putting the right information at the right time and not underestimating those small steps and what they can bring. So thanks for walking through that evolution, Will, and explaining the value of that role.
For sure.
So before I turn it over to Hema to kind of close us out here, because I know getting close to time, again, I hope a lot of folks are taking away some themes around many roles under the umbrella, these combinations of skills and how they're calibrated a little bit differently depending on where people are in their career, the role they're in, their company, their department, the project, that it's a team sport under the analytics umbrella, but most importantly, that it's not just about the data and the insights that you derive, but how you actually use that and make sure that you're working with the stakeholders to actually drive some kind of action with it, right? It's not going to get there up off the screen and kind of do something with its own, at least not yet until ChatGPT takes over the world. But in the meantime, we need to be there, and we need to be able to gain that trust, be business partners. In fact, the one brand that I was always trying to build in data science teams was that we were business partners first and foremost. So Hema, I would love to hear a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, Analytics for Business Success, and maybe close us out with a little bit of commentary around analytics fitness.
Sure. As I mentioned in my role in Akamai and kind of my experience in EMC, one of the things as a practitioner, and I noticed as a practitioner and talking to the executives, and not only in the company I was working at, or current company, just talking to folks all across in different roles, right? Like we, whether it's data scientists or executives in the analytics and data transformation, I noticed that there are some challenges folks were having with respect to, everybody wants to do analytics transformation. For example, ChatGPT is the latest buzzword. Everybody wants to know what it is, and now there's a ChatGPT 4, and then all the latest companies are having it. And so, okay, if you want to spin off a new product, right, then how do you get that off the ground? For example, if you just take ChatGPT, how do you get that off the ground? You need data, right? So how do you start from like an idea, from an idea conception to like a problem statement to a final analytics product or a data product, like Matt mentioned, right? So those are the things people are struggling from. And then it's such an interdisciplinary field where you need input from the business, you need the input from the engineers, you need like the hardcore coders, you need the folks with the soft skills, and then you need to talk to the business who are going to fund your projects, right? So there's kind of you have to wear, as Joe mentioned, wear multiple hats, and people struggle with that. And I struggle with that. I have to be honest about it, and would be frustrated. And probably Joe, we had an analytics club in EMC where we used to talk about it, and you kind of, then you realize I came out of EMC, and then I started a similar thing in Akamai, and I look around, it's the same problem over and over again. It's not that the executives don't get it. It's not that practitioners don't get it. It's kind of how do we build bridges between the data scientists or the analytics practitioners, the product analysts, and the executives who want to fund these analytics transformation. And at the end of the day, we have to, we want to get insights into evidence-based decision making using data. At the end of the day, we have to be the organization have to be profitable, operational, decrease operational costs, increase market share, and all that kind of jazz we hear about. And so I felt, so it's kind of so the book covers, so I felt that, and this was my COVID project, so a lot of folks got puppies or took up baking or and what else, knitting or whatnot, and I decided to write a book that had so much ideas floating around. I was like, okay, I need to dump this somewhere, and then and those 20-hour book days, so some of this went into that. And so I kind of and I felt that if you have one book to cover some of the, how do you connect the business with the analytics? How do you kind of build the advanced analytics portfolio? How do you go through the various stages, like analytics fitness? Start with the fitness 0, which is Excel spreadsheets, error-prone spreadsheets, to descriptive, which is level 1, and then 2 or 3 and 4, going up to predictive analytics. And then I few more terms such as data as a horizontal, how to build an analytics platform, how to leverage the in-house expertise in analytics. I'll stop there, Joe. I think we're at time. Sorry, I went.
No, I appreciate it very much. And, everyone should be reading this book and using it as their analytics go-to manual. Have that thing on your desk, photocopy pages, put it on the wall, everything you need to do there. And, I love it because it really just summarizes so many of the themes that we were talking about tonight. And for everyone who's in the call, like I said, make sure you're on LinkedIn afterwards. You want to be following each of these panelists. You'll see it again in the invite. You'll learn more about Hema's book that's there. During COVID, I didn't write a book. My second son was born, but, I'm feeling like I should have wrote a book too, maybe. Not instead. I love my son. He's a great guy, and he is an aspiring data scientist like his brother. But, I really appreciate you guys spending the time with us today. So, Will, Hema, Renita, Matt, thank you. Congratulations on all of your successes. I couldn't be prouder. And, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would we be on this call talking about this from a university perspective and talking about how analytics has grown into this massively enormous thing? I guess we all dreamed and hoped for it, but it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't real yet in a lot of ways. But it's so cool to see you guys at all these different companies and just really beginning your journeys. So thanks again to all the students and alumni and friends and coworkers and former students and everyone else that's on. I hope you enjoyed tonight's conversation. Episode 7 will be coming in the month of May. We're going to have a guest from Toyota that's going to be joining us. Really exciting. More details to come. There's also an analytics open house for our analytics programs here at WGU in the College of IT happening next Monday, the 17th. I believe in the chat window that link was there, but check us out. You can learn more about our analytics programs and learn how you can bring a lot of these skills to life in your own careers. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. That wraps us up, and I look forward to seeing you in episode 7.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye,
so
guys.
much.